Hi, my name's Amanda Easton. I'm a performer, singer-songwriter from Sydney, Australia. I make retro-inspired theatrical electronic pop. But when I'm not doing my own music, I do
cabaret,
cover band gigs, solo gigs, tribute shows, recording sessions. Welcome to my Circle of Light vlog.
But I'll be watching you from here.
Hi there, how are you? I'm just doing my weekly check-in. I believe this is my video diaries number 29. So I think next week we'll definitely have to have a glass of champagne as well. Anyway, I wanted to check in just as I usually do to check how everybody is, and I think this kind of thing is more important than ever, and even if we can only do it through a screen, it's better than nothing. And I purposely timed this live post for 10:30 in the morning Australian time, Sydney time, so that it might coincide with some of my American and Canadian friends, because I haven't got to see you guys for a while. I've been doing my live posts at night time, which maybe it feels more like a gig, so I'm kind of used to that time frame, but I thought I would try and catch people on the other side of the world. It's actually really hard in Sydney to try and find a time that everybody else in the world is going to be awake. Although I think at the moment a lot of people are awake at kind of odd times. But I hope you're doing okay. Obviously the news coming out of the US is a little bit scary, which is why I wanted to time this post at this time. So if you're from the US, give me a wave, let me know how you're doing, send me a message. I'm always happy to be at the other end of a vent, because I vent at people all the time, and it just, you know, it makes me feel better. And I know how important it is to have an ear, so don't be shy. I do these weekly, you know, vlogs, video logs for lots of different reasons. I used to write a lot of blogs, and I still do write them as well, but I like talking even more than I like writing, as much as I love writing. So I kind of decided to make these about video, and it also feels a little bit more interactive because I can see you when you're there, and that's a really lovely thing. And so every week I'll do a video diary that will include a little chat like this one, and probably either an interview with one of the amazing musicians that I work with, and that's all done on Zoom nowadays, or a little piece of music, whether it's like an a cappella track or a duet or something like that. So, you know, I don't think I've ever been as busy not earning money as I am right now, but that's okay. I hope you're all doing well and managing to make ends meet as well in these difficult times. But I did say that when I did these vlogs I would try and keep really positive, and so I've been trawling the news for positive stuff, and there's plenty of it out there. And I just found out, this is positive for me, I don't know if you agree, but Lady Gaga is releasing a new album very soon. It's going to be called Chromatica. Are you a Lady Gaga fan? I know not everybody appreciates her style, and I think probably her first couple of songs I'm like, okay. And then I think the turning point for me is I actually did a kids show called Princesses of Pop that I produced as well, and I played Lady Gaga. Like, I actually dressed up and sang the songs and did the choreography I was capable of, and with two girlfriends that are singers as well, of course. One did Katy Perry and one did Rihanna, and we went out on the road and went to all sorts of regional towns and did this show, and oh my goodness, it was so much fun.
Let's go, okay. I don't think they need any help. Rah, 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 ah, ah, la, 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 want your bad romance.
The kids would come up afterwards and want to get our autographs, and it's just making the kids happy and seeing them jump around. And you know what? All those three artists are probably undervalued in a lot of ways. I mean, they're massive stars, so I think they're doing okay. But I think a lot of people look down their nose at them because they're pop. But in all three cases, I think they're amazing singers and songwriters, and some of the songs are brilliant. So I think I fell in love with Lady Gaga at that stage. So I'm really excited that she's got a new album coming out. And this is positive and negative, I guess, but I had this plan to do a show. I've started writing a new show, like a cabaret show that I was planning to launch at Claire's in Darlinghurst, which is a beautiful French restaurant cabaret room. And I had that all booked in for June or July, so obviously that's not going to happen. And so I was getting ready to, put all the songs together, and the show was called Gaga versus Me. And because I feel like I've got kind of a kinship with Lady Gaga, because you see, she's sold like billions of records and I haven't. She's a mega famous rich pop star and I'm not. And she wears meat dresses and I'm a vegetarian. But I could wear a dress with bits of broccoli and carrots hanging off it, and I think that would be very attractive. No, but in all seriousness, why I think I feel an affinity with Lady Gaga is just she loves her theatre in pop, and I might not be quite as outrageous as her, but I love costuming and I love the theatre side of pop, and I think it belongs there. I'm not a person that stands on the stage and kind of gazes at my shoes, and I know that's a lot more cool, but that's not me. And I love jazz and I love cabaret and I love rock and I love dance music, and she does all of those things. And I got to say, after learning a whole lot of her songs, she does them well. They're not easy. I think a lot of people kind of changed their mind about Lady Gaga when she came out with A Star Is Born, and she'd written and co-written a lot of the songs, and you saw her more as a singer-songwriter than a really zany theatrical kind of pop star, and I loved that too, but I wasn't surprised, I guess. And then of course it's early in the morning, you can tell, so excuse me, keep clearing my throat. When she came out with Tony Bennett and did all the jazz duets and things, I loved it. I just think she's an amazing artist. So the idea of this show, Gaga versus Me, was obviously there's not a lot of comparisons in our lives in many ways, but from a musical point of view, I think there is. And I was going to do a lot of Gaga songs and a lot of my own songs, kind of intersperse the two, with all different stories about my life and about Lady Gaga. And I was going to do some of the costuming. Maybe not the dress with the broccoli hanging off it, that was a joke. But I do actually have a couple of Gaga costumes from when I did the kids show with Gaga, and I was going to kind of, create my own version of her theatrical zaniness. And the idea was I was going to launch the show at Claire's, the cabaret venue in Darlinghurst, and then I was going to submit it to the Sydney Fringe Festival. And I was thinking about all that recently, and I was really excited about this. And this is just one of the many things, I guess, I don't know, I'm left in the lurch in, as many of us are. I mean, that's small potatoes, I know, compared to what other people are going through. So no complaining here. I will get to it eventually, and I guess all of those things will be all the sweeter when they do happen, because we've had to wait, for them all to happen. Everything's kind of on hold and there's lots of delays, and you have to work a little bit harder to make things happen, and I think that actually makes things better in the end. So look out for my show Gaga versus Me. I'm really excited. I'm still putting it together, even though I have no idea when I'll actually be able to perform it, but I feel like I have to just keep going, keep creating things, keep working on things, because I actually got a gig yesterday. That was very exciting. It's for May 2021, but it's a start. I think it'll probably happen by May 2021. Who knows? But cross fingers for me. It's just exciting. Somebody called me and offered me a gig. It used to be kind of such a common occurrence, and now it's very special. So this certainly makes us appreciate things, huh? Anyway, I'm going to sign off now. This is just a quick hello to see how you're doing. Please drop me a line and let me know how you're doing. This vlog will go up on my YouTube channel, along with an interview that I did with Chris Fields. Chris Fields is a drummer and percussionist who was originally from the States, and he lives in Australia now and works here. I've worked with him in so many different projects. A really great guy, really interesting background. His father and his grandfather were both drummer percussionists as well, and his father was really well known in the States, or probably still is really well known. I think he still plays. And Chris talks a lot about, growing up in that atmosphere, and he does a whole lot of world music with Sri Lankan, Afghani, Indian musicians, both here and when you could travel in other countries. So really interesting guy. So my interview with him will follow this vlog up on YouTube. So please visit me there. It's youtube.com/Amanda Easton, and that's Easton like Sheena. If you were listening a couple of weeks ago, you would have heard me talk about how I recently discovered that I am actually related to Sheena Easton. So that's Easton. And at the moment, I'm doing a giveaway of some of my original music. So if you want to sign up to my mailing list, just put in your name and email address at the top of my Facebook page. There's a little link, or on my website, which is amandaeaston.com, and I will send you actually my 3 most popular singles before the previous release. So I'll send you that little bundle of songs for free. You don't have to stay subscribed to the list. If you've got too many emails, you can just grab those and leave. I won't be offended. But lovely to see you, and don't forget to drop me a line, because I always like hearing from you, and stay well.
It was the day after September 11 had happened. Every Sunday I would always go practice with my tabla guru and be all day practicing tabla. And I remember being there and just, we had a Hindu who was my guru, myself from the United States. There was a Sikh gentleman who was playing sitar. We had like 3 Afghani musicians, like 2 singers, one that was playing rabab. And, we spent the whole day just playing music and eating food. And it only dawned at the end of the day how magical that was, considering what had just happened in the world.
Hi, my name's Amanda Easton. I'm a performer, singer-songwriter from Sydney, Australia. I have the pleasure of working with some of the best and nicest people in the music business. Here are their stories.
Truth will show when you stand so close, eye to
Like most of us, you're a freelance musician, and you play everything from pop to jazz, and that doesn't even explain the range of stuff that you do. But this current crisis aside, which has obviously changed our live work a lot, what are the projects you've been working on?
Well, kind of going into the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I've been focusing a lot on my sort of multicultural collaborative things that I generally do. So I've been performing with some artists that did travel over from Sri Lanka. I did some performing with some musicians from Afghanistan. I was actually meant to be doing some more of that around this time of the year. And then also I've been sort of working on writing again. I had sort of taken a pause from writing original music. And I've been sort of leading and back into that. So mostly focusing on creative projects in the past few months, and still, I guess, now in isolation, I'm kind of trying to get the writing done so that when everything opens back up, I have some new material, whenever that might be. So, but mostly a lot of it's been with international, artists and people like from India and Afghanistan and Sri Lanka and some of those areas. And that's kind of what I've been doing more recently. As far as creative work is happening. Yeah.
ये आईने से अकेले में गुफ्तगू क्या है
As I used to. So a lot of the performing has been more original projects and kind of those types of things. Probably in the last year or so. Yeah.
So tell me about Atma Blue.
Well, that's my first sort of compositional project that I did. So it's also the band and the name of the album that came out. So I'm a drummer and percussionist, as you're aware, and I think doing and I've performed on other people's albums and recorded and those types of things, and I thought after almost close to 40 years, it was probably time I wrote my own album. And that was a group that I had, and I had started writing for. It has some amazing artists in it. Sandy Evans, who's one of the great jazz saxophone players from Australia. James Greening was in that project. Michael Galazzi, Jeremy Salkins, plus an Afghani tabla player named Yama Sashar, who's now living in Europe. So yeah, and then we put out an album a few years back, and it's been a bit quiet, but I've been writing some. I still play with those artists, but I've been in the process of writing some different material, and
With the same
that's kind of where
kind of aim?
yeah, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think it'll be in that arena, yeah, because what I found, and this was a surprise to me, was that I think the group had been together for maybe 3 or 4 years, and really great. We had some wonderful gigs, and it was really happening. So I was like, it's time to record, and really was very happy with the album. And I kind of thought, okay, this is going to be it. We're going to go out, and I'm going to want to tour this and everything. But I actually found that it felt more like a full stop on a statement as opposed to like the beginning of a new statement.
Oh, interesting.
And so. And that was an interesting experience because that's not what I felt when I went in. So, and I just felt that I was hearing different sounds. So I've got a slightly, I've got some different sounds in my head as far as instrumentation. It'll probably be a few of the same musicians and maybe some extra ones, and maybe even some in India that I've been talking with over the years. So, yeah.
So how long have you been living in Australia?
Almost 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
So
and
yeah.
Where were you from?
Yeah, I moved here in 2001.
Right.
I all over the U.S., but I lived most of my life in Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
So how does a boy from Atlanta, Georgia, get to be playing music from Afghanistan and Sri Lanka and India and with artists from those countries? How does that happen?
Well, look, I come from a pretty eclectic upbringing. So my father's a wonderful percussionist and still very active. He was an artist and a musician in the late 60s. He started his career then like a jazz musician and stuff, and got into playing tabla. So I grew up with one of the best record collections probably in the Southeast United States. And my father played tabla as, on the side a little bit, played jazz and stuff. So I was drawn to a huge range of music very young. And then that led me to sort of pursue some of those things at a pretty serious level. And when you do that, I mean, at the time I didn't think about it. I just liked the music, but when you do those, over time, it becomes part of what you're known for. And, I don't know how that happens, but sometimes, when people don't quite know, they want a drummer, or they want someone that kind of knows how to handle certain things. It's a certain skill set that not everyone has. So yeah. But it's been a lifelong passion that's kind of opened that up, which has been lovely.
But having said that, the way we met, can you remember, I always ask my interviewees this, can you remember when we first met?
Yeah, actually I can. I always remember that. I hadn't moved here yet. I was actually out visiting to see if I was going to move here.
Checking us out.
I think I was at a bar, and I was in there, and you happened to be there. And the person I was with actually was like, "Oh, that's a really good singer from Sydney." And I think we actually chatted a little bit, and you actually gave me your number back then. And I don't think I saw you again for 10 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. But it was the first actual phone number I had for a musician, because I didn't know anybody in Australia.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of happened that, I remember it was always there, but you come and you start building a career, and you just play with different people. and then I don't know. I think you called me once, and then it clicked. I was like, well, of course I know who you are. I mean, I had your number in my wallet for like 10 years or something. So.
And we've ended up doing so many things, and nothing has been anything like your kind of the passion you were just talking about, this world music thing. I've dragged you into my cabaret projects, like this Motowny kind of cabaret thing. My original stuff, which is obviously electronica pop. We've done some standard jazz stuff together, and just about everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, I don't, and I think you're kind of the same. You know, I came from a family of a professional musician. You know, for me, I grew up so doing that, and so drum set's still my first instrument. It always has been. I mean, I can't even remember. I mean, I don't remember not having drums in my life. So, and I think I started taking it seriously when I was about 12, but I'd already played. And then I started gigging when I was 16, and I was gigging with older musicians. So, I started by depping for my father. So it wasn't, there was a lot of pressure. He was a well-known guy. And so I had to jump in there with people I had no right to really play with, and hopefully not be too bad. And so, I didn't, for me, I've always just enjoyed playing with great musicians and people that are passionate about what they do. And the genre is not that important, Of course, when you're left to your own devices, you kind of go certain ways. But, I've played straight ahead jazz stuff. I've recorded on albums for country people, and country artists, and that's something that I've always enjoyed, So I think it's the passion and the quality of the music, and sort of the authenticity and the behind it that's always attracted me more than, it's this particular genre necessarily, and I enjoy it all. Everything has its own joy, to it.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're being, kind of artsy and stuff. And sometimes you're just there to hold down a groove and let people have a good time,
For sure.
And it's all fun.
Yeah. So if you were doing gigs at such a young age, was there a particular time you thought to yourself, okay, this is going to be my career, or was it a given, or did you just kind of go with the flow and that's what happened?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I don't think I ever... So I guess there's two different things. I mean, there's one thing about it being a career, and then there's other thing about being like serious about it. And, I had always been, because of my surroundings, as soon as I said I'm interested in music, that became kind of a thing. Like it was like, I practiced a fair bit. The US is pretty competitive. So I was involved in, marching things and orchestral percussion, and, plus just playing, drums all the time and stuff. And I probably started gigging before I thought about this is what I was going to do.
Yeah.
The more important thing was that I think for me was to figure out that maybe I had something of my own to offer, because my father was very well known where I grew up. And so, if you'd go play, it'd always be like, oh man, it's Jerry's kid, this is what it is. And so, and I, of course, looked up to him, and so I actually went through a period where I sort of lied to him, and I told him I didn't want to play. I didn't want to study music anymore. I didn't. And I locked myself away for about 6 months, and I would only practice when he was not in the house. So he didn't know I was doing it. And I think that was around about 15 or 16-ish when that happened. I think I was just a bit, not burnout, but I was a bit like, is this actually something that I really like? I mean, I knew I liked it, but do I have something to say as this? Like, do I have anything to offer? And I just found that like that actually, without that pressure, I started to really enjoy it and realize that I had my own voice, or at least the beginning of that. And so I think what happened is he heard me I didn't know he was back in the house, and he heard me practicing. And it wasn't that long after that he got me to sort of depth for him on a few gigs.
How amazing.
And then he actually asked me to do substitute teaching for his students.
Wow.
And that was a big deal. I mean, I wasn't, so, and then it was I mean, I knew it was there to stay. But I actually went to school for visual arts. I've always painted and all that stuff as well. And because I was already gigging, I went to school for visual arts, and I did music as well, but I wanted to do both. But it just took over, when I finished, I was already playing. I got picked up by, a band, and I, did all of that for a while and toured. And by that time it was obvious that's what I was doing anyway, it just kind of happened. So yeah, it wasn't, I guess just because it's been around, it just sort of took over, but it was one of those things that I had to kind of make sure that I had something to offer. And I think that, for anyone that's important, but I think especially because of sort of having a bit of that baggage, it was a bit of an interesting experience. And, probably one of the best things, that he ever said when I was quite young was that, like, I don't sound like him, that was something that was a nice thing, because, and that was cool. And then of course, then coming to here, I didn't know anyone. So, it didn't matter, it was just one of those things. By that time I'd been doing it a while. So.
Yeah. But I think about a lot of musicians, including me. My parents wouldn't have wanted me to choose music if that was, if they had anything to do with it, only because it can be a very unstable financially kind of a career. And, from my parents' point of view, I did go to university, but they wanted me to use my degree and get something well paid and corporate and whatever else. But your dad was already in that world. And I think your dad's dad was as well, wasn't he? Wasn't your grandfather also a musician?
Yeah, he was like, I mean, he gave it up. But I know that before World War II, and I think just afterwards, I mean, he was a very good drummer. I mean, he could have continued to do that. I mean, he was semi-professional. He used to gig around Philadelphia, which is where my family's originally from.
Yeah.
And actually, later when I started touring, I actually wound up playing at a club that I found out that he used to play at back when he was, which is pretty amazing. I didn't realize until later that had happened. And that actually, my first big band, they got a lot of bands in the U.S. and I used to play in like the high school jazz band, and it was a good band, and playing all the Benny Goodman and all that stuff, which is great. And I think my grandmother came to see me play, and when I finished, she was crying, and I thought it was because I played really bad, so I didn't get it. And then later I realized that I must have looked like my granddad, and I never met him, so. Yeah. He actually, I think, died a year before I was born. So, but yeah, no, I mean, my dad never pushed me into it. Like, it wasn't one of those things that, I mean, I think he always used to say, don't be a musician unless you can't help it.
That's great. I love that.
And it's true. I mean, I think that, you have to have that compulsion. And I think that's for everyone that does it. That's the thing. It's like, I mean, he even calls it the disease. You just have that thing that you got to do it. So and I realized pretty early on I had it. And it just takes over. So but he never really was. It wasn't one of those things like he's like, you got to do this or anything. It's just that it was around. I have a brother who was around all similar things, and he just wasn't drawn to it. And and that's just how it is,
Yeah. So partly in the genes and partly in the environment, probably.
I think so. Yeah. And exactly. Because you're not always drawn to it,
Yeah.
And that's the case. I mean, he had the same influences, I guess, in a lot of ways, and but my parents couldn't really tell me not to do things. That was the thing. Like they
were quite hippie too, weren't they, your parents?
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they would, I mean, they were definitely part of that movement. My mom probably more than my dad, but she was an artist and was into theater, and I mean, she was a Montessori school teacher, but the arts were always a huge thing for us. Yeah. So it wasn't. I think my grandparents might have hoped I was going to go into law or something. I did pretty well in school, so I had options, and I don't know. I think they might have been quietly disappointed that I didn't use my scholarship to go do something academic, but
Yes.
but whatever,
Yeah.
no one could really tell me anything. So
Yeah.
Well, thinking of all the things that you've done so far, particularly a lot of the overseas work that I hear you doing, is there any particular experience, any particular show that really stands out as amazing and magical?
So far?
look, I mean, well, yeah, look, I thought of, it's funny because I think, I've been doing this a while now, and it's hard sometimes because most of most things that are good in my life have something to do with music, so I mean, but the show perspective of it is actually not the bulk of being a musician. I mean, it is, but that's that's the part that people see, all the stuff that you do, all the work you put in, that for me has always been what being a musician is. And then, the performing is the other aspect of that happens. But I think that, I've done some big shows, there's some things that were, I've played for like 75,000 people and it's amazing. And then the next day there's that was at the Sydney Cricket Grounds for I think it was for the bushfire relief, and it was with it was amazing. I'd been in Australia and it felt like, wow, I've kind of made it. There was all these, people I had, grown up hearing, and like Olivia Newton-John and people like that. I was playing with her and Barry Gibb and some people, and I'm sitting there like, whoa, this is incredible. And then the next night I was playing it in a jazz club, 505 at the time. I think there was like 5 people in the club. It was a real reality.
Like, don't you know who I am?
No, but it was funny because I was actually more nervous and terrified about the gig on the Sunday.
Yeah.
Because the music was so hard.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was one of those things, but like, it's funny because those things are great. But I think for me, I've had experiences where you can feel how important music can be to people. I think sometimes as a musician, you don't, when you're on the producing side of it, you don't always get to feel what that is like from the other side. So, a couple of things that happened that were around that, one wasn't even a gig. It was a rehearsal. I hadn't been here that long. And it was the day after September 11 had happened. Every Sunday, I would always go practice with my tabla guru and be all day practicing tabla. And I remember being there and just, we had a Hindu who was my guru, myself from the United States. There was a Sikh gentleman who was playing sitar. We had like 3 Afghani musicians, like 2 singers, one that was playing rabab. And, we spent the whole day just playing music and eating food. And it only dawned at the end of the day how magical that was, considering what had just happened in the world.
You had the little world really, there in one space.
Yeah, and there've been some experiences like that I think those types of things. Later with Yama, who's a wonderful tabla player from Afghanistan, and his family who live here, he asked me to go play in Melbourne, and it was for a group of refugees I didn't really know a lot about, the Hazara, who are kind of a minority from Afghanistan, who a lot of the boat people that came over at that area were fleeing from the Taliban as well as from the war that had been going on. And there'd been a lot of persecution for a long period of time, and a group that I didn't know about. And just, we flew down there and it was packed, and I was backing up a musician that was, had fled Afghanistan and was living in Europe. And we were playing for these people who had been through incredible amounts of pain and suffering, and just like how much that music meant at that time to those people, and to be a part of that. And then also how profound it was. And I mean, I'm kind of, my country, well, at least, where I was born, was currently bombing that country, and I'm there like just sharing this with, all this music and playing their music, and enjoying that. And you could just see that it was, it was incredibly important for that group, for them to have that. And they were really relaxed. And those types of things happen with music, and they tend to sort of be more, I don't know, they seem to leave a bit more of a mark for me than some of the, the show. I mean, shows are great. I love it. Don't get me wrong. It's awesome. But those things really pop out because there's those times you can really feel that it means something, and that's, music is a profoundly human experience. And so there's one other actually that is kind of a bit more about when I was doing a workshop. And I mean, it was probably the most emotional musical moment ever when I was just doing I do drum workshops sometimes for, kids and different people. And I went up to Blue Mountains, and it was for a group of kids with autism and I think it was mostly autism and maybe Down syndrome. And they were all there with their carers, and I was playing. And, I had done these things before, and they're always emotional. But I was just playing, doing my thing. And the kids were all getting excited. And there was one girl next to me that was really getting animated and singing. And I looked over, and her carer had burst into tears and was crying and was really upset. And you don't know what's going on because you're just there doing your thing. And I finished, and I was like, oh man, have I done something? Or did she hurt herself? What's going on? And then I found out that girl hadn't spoken or made a sound in about a year and a half.
Oh.
So, that kind of a thing was well, I can't be doing something that's that bad, and it's funny because you forget that, I think, as a performer, that you don't know the impact that you're having, that on someone. It could be, bringing back memories. It could be, just having a chance to relax because you don't know. So, but those times when you get to feel that for a moment and go, wow, because I know that I think for us as musicians, it's partially why we're drawn to that. We feel something about music, to be able to communicate with people that maybe I don't even speak their language, but we start playing music and everything makes sense. It's all fine.
Yes.
But realize that's partially what we do for other people. And when you get to feel that, it's pretty cool. So those are probably my top three. And, the other gigs are fun too. They're all great. So, yeah.
I love that. I was about to ask you, what do you love about music? I have a feeling you might have answered that one for me already.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, I just think that yeah, it is. It's the fact that it's hard to not be compassionate and human if you're an honest musician, if you're sharing that with people, and you don't always. There's a lot of stuff that happens. There's times when, you're not playing well or your ego gets in the way and you're like, man, I'm the best or whatever, or the other side and you're like, I suck, all those things happen. But I think, the reality is that it's a sharing experience. It's something that's very profoundly human, and to be a part of it's pretty awesome, yeah. I guess that's about it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Could you name a worst gig you've ever had?
Oh, geez. I don't know, not off the top of my head. I think probably the ones that always stand out are, the ones for me where I knew I hadn't maybe prepared enough, or I could tell that I wasn't ready, and hopefully hopefully those all come when you're young and you don't repeat those mistakes, and I definitely have had some of those, but I wouldn't treat them as worst gigs because they were, but they really have for me, those gigs are if I feel like maybe I'm not concentrated or focused or I'm not, those things stand out, but yeah, I've definitely had some really heart-wrenching ones. I remember playing a show pretty early on, and granted, I was sight reading a show I'd never seen. The first time I did it was on the gig, and I was pretty young. I was like, okay, I'm going to be great. Thought I was pretty awesome. And, I kind of came out the other end, and it was like no one had died. And that was about all I could say about it. And, the band leader kind of turns around and was like, well, that was atrocious. And, and was like, it's got to be fixed by tomorrow, and I was like, and I knew it. I just knew that I had just blown that whole thing. So I had one chance, you know, to get it right after that. And I did.
Lucky to get that chance, right? Because often we don't. Often it's a one thing.
I mean, it was one of those things, and it was it. And, you know, and it just, there was a lot of reasons for that. Maybe I wasn't ready for it. Maybe, you know, but it doesn't matter. But, you know, those feelings aren't great, you know, where you're just like, whoa, that just totally didn't happen, you know? And, but I was lucky, I think, you know, and I don't think you're right. That doesn't, and I think nowadays where there's not as much music going on, live music, you know, I think they happen even less for musicians, especially who are starting out, because you do make mistakes, you know, and I was given the opportunity a few times early on to hopefully not repeat any mistakes, but, you know, play, as I said, I mean, you know, there were some times when I'd play with people that I really admired, you know, that I'd grown up around, and they would just be like, yeah, you weren't really listening then, were you? And you're like, oh, and they're like, don't let it happen again. And you're like, oh. And then you come back, and, you know, and that was okay. And it couldn't have been that bad, you know, because they would have let you come back. But you can tell, you know, and you can feel that. And I think, yeah, you try to keep those as minimal as possible. And as you get better and more experience, they do, and you learn, you know, what it takes to kind of be a professional. But yeah, those are the ones that the ones you regret are when you probably haven't prepared as much as you should, you know? And you want to definitely not let that happen very often. So.
Which brings me to the point, you do a lot of educating, whether it's the drum workshop kind of things you were talking about earlier, or if it's at, you know, a college like AIM, where you're teaching future musicians. If let's put you in the kind of the AIM context again, when you're teaching people that want to be out there in the industry and actually doing what you do. If you could only leave them with one thing, and obviously there's a lot more than one thing that you teach them, but if there's one thing that you'd really want them to know as they walk out the door for the last time after you've been teaching them, what would that one message be?
It sounds kind of cheesy, but it's, you know, don't be afraid to work really hard for things that you are just interested in, like that you're drawn to, you know, that you're passionate about. I'm not talking about music in general, but, you know, but like, you know, if you get turned on by Mongolian throat singing or something, and you just, there's something that happens and you're like, man, I got to learn about this, do it, you know, really go for it, but don't do it half, like go for it, you know, find out everything you possibly can. Every famous Mongolian throat singer, I only know maybe two, you know.
You know, two more than I do.
Whatever, but you know, like whatever that crazy thing is. I mean, of course, you know, have everything together, but you gotta have those things that keep your fire going. You know, that when the phone isn't ringing, and hopefully it rings, and you have a great career, but it doesn't always ring, and that's just life. You know, it just goes up and down, and you've got to keep that fire happening, but you have to back it up with study and work, and you have to do that when no one's watching. So, you know, I think that's it.
And that's really interesting. And it is putting in the work, isn't it? It's interesting, when I asked you what the worst gigs were, you automatically went to ones where you felt like you didn't do your best job, rather than say, oh, the audience was rubbish at that gig, or the sound was terrible there, and oh, the lighting, or there was no audience or whatever. But it was about, you know, you not bringing your best game to the gig. So obviously that's an important thing with you.
Well, it is. I mean, I think, and maybe that comes from being around the industry, you know, that, I mean, and the reality is that, you know, I'd like to say that every single time I turn up to a gig, I felt like playing that gig, like from the beginning. You know, you have days where you're like, oh my God, I saw, you know, like, I don't feel like they had a horrible day, or, you know, you try to minimize that, and as you know, and obviously the more you prepare, the less it has an impact, I guess. But that was something that was kind of ingrained in me pretty early on, that, you know, that I remember my dad saying, never let a rehearsal, like even a rehearsal, like don't let a rehearsal stop because you haven't prepared. And that was pretty heavy, was that like not even a rehearsal, like you just need to be the guy that is prepared and that knows what they're doing, and it's a hard thing. It's like, I mean, there's some times when you don't achieve that as much as possible, but I think that that's what we strive for. And at least that's always in the back of my head. So even when I have gone down times where it happens, you're like, oh man, and then you just try to catch that, and not to let it happen again. But I mean, it's always sort of been that, because I've also seen great musicians, who maybe aren't working as much as they used to, or, that side of it can go up and down. And I've seen that happen to other people, and it happens, it's happened to me, it happens to everyone, where, and it's gonna, and if it hasn't, it will. It's just life. That's how things happen, so that's not what it's about. It's about that constant trying to get better and be on your game, whatever that means for you, because no one's going to do it for you, and the harsh reality is that that not many people care about your music other than you. I mean, in the sense of like, they don't care that much if you're around, I know that sounds really harsh, but it's the truth, right? Like, I mean, some people are like, hey, what happened to this guy? Whatever, but you do, and you do it no matter what, that's kind of it. No matter what the situation is, and there have been definitely times when, I've let it get to me, like, oh, I hate the sound, or I hate this, or you get psyched out, I've had times where people I admire in the audience, and you suddenly freak out. You're like, oh my God, and it's just because you're not doing the things, and you're not just letting the music be there to serve the music and just be part of that, because pretty much when you do that, it all works, you know. But when those other things get in, like, oh my God, I just saw one of my heroes, and then you start doing stuff, like for me as a drummer, you start doing things that are stupid. It's like, why would I ever play that?
Don't worry, I've done it too.
And you just like, and I think that's the thing is like, if I listen back and I hear something that, if I played something that the music didn't tell me to play, I regret it, and sometimes you do, I've been guilty, you're like, oh, should know this lick or whatever. And, you just kind of like, that was so dumb, like, why would I do that? And those things are a bit cringy, because those are the things that I try to avoid, and I try to encourage my students to avoid if they can, so,
Yeah, wonderful.
Oh, it's been so lovely talking to you. It feels like it's been too long.
It's been ages, but, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see each other in the flesh before too long.
Absolutely.
Truth will show when you stand so close, eye to eye.
Okay, all the best.
But I'll be watching you.